voters in Yavapai County on that day. The Yavapai County Board of Supervisors is asking that you renew the existing quarter-cent jails tax for an additional 20 years. The original tax began with collection on July 1st in the year 2000. CTC reached out to the county and asked if they would speak and answer questions in regard to the history of the tax and the need for it to continue. And I have to give them credit for responding quickly and agreeing to be here today. We've been having some struggles with other boards, and I won't go into that, all right? And I'd also like to take a big thanks, I was gonna say take it back to him, but he's here today, David McAfee. I requested that he provide me with this year's ballot language, as well as ballot language and supporting arguments from 1999, and both were in my email within an hour. Some of you know the struggles we are having with other agencies right now, and to get that kind of response was refreshing. That was a great word I put in there. So please tell him good job. You know, and I put this in, Dave, sorry, not a raise, but maybe a firm handshake. You know, I am doing CTC. I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. County 4, District 4 Supervisor Craig Brown is here with us today. District 1 Supervisor Rolly Simmons is here. Our local sheriff Scott Masher. And County Administrator Phil Bordone. And I have to apologize to Phil. In a Facebook blast, I spelled your name wrong, but having lived my whole life with the name Kuknio, I get it, and I'm sorry. I just wanted to, would like to invite you guys to begin by telling us why extending this tax is a good idea. And afterwards, we're gonna field questions, both from people that couldn't be here from CTC and the audience as well. So I don't know who wants to take the head on this, but go ahead. You gotta push this button right here. You're good to go.
Yeah, a little technical difficulty with the mic. Let me just say, I'll be brief. I'll just let you know the election. This is a special election on May 15th. The Board of Supervisors did push it back 60 days. It is an all mail-in ballot. What it is for is to extend the existing quarter-cent sales tax that funds 48% of the jail district's budget, or your jail budget. What I want to make sure you all know is this is not going to have any polling locations, so you are going to receive all your ballots at your home through the mail. You need to make sure that when you receive it, recognize that's a ballot, pull it out and vote. That's the most important thing, is to vote. You should see those ballots come out April 23rd, and again, you need to turn them in by May 15th. You can put them in the mailbox, you can also mail them, but you can also drop them off at our locations at the county and cities and towns. We have a nice little brochure that we've given you, and on the back of it, we have all the locations that you can drop it off at. What I try to tell people is, this is one of the most important revenue sources we have today right now. The Board of Supervisors back in 2000 had worked with the voters. 70% of them voted to have this tax approved because they knew it would fund the jail system and would be funded by many other people that come through our community, tourists and guests. It's been in place almost 20 years. It's coming to a point where it sunsets. My job, working with the Board of Supervisors on their budget, we have a challenge over the next 2 years. If this does not pass, we will have to look at making up $8.8 million of the jail budget, which is an $18 million budget. So I ask that you vote. We're here to answer questions. I'll probably want to turn this over first to the sheriff, maybe.
Sure, you betcha.
Some comments.
Thank you, Phil, and hello, everyone. It's nice to see many of you again. Really, for the sheriff, my obligation by statute, by law, is to run the jail. That's what I do. The Board of Supervisors, by law, by statute, has to fund the jail. So I think the most important part for me in this formula is, am I running a jail that's efficient, Am I running a jail that has people in there that needs to be in there, violent people who victimize us in our communities, in our neighborhoods? And just as important, am I making sure that the people who don't need to be in jail aren't in jail? And I think that's very critical. The jail is one of the most complex parts of my job. We cook about 50 to 60,000 meals a month. We provide medical services for all the inmates. By federal law, within 2 weeks, every inmate has to have a physical. We have to provide them medical care. Whatever prescription drugs they were on, we have to take care of that. That's us, that's the taxpayers. I'm just as much a taxpayer, no less than any of you. So I have to make sure that all these things that we do in the jail, the transportation of inmates, everything else we do, is the most efficient way that I can do it for our tax money and for the money that the Board of Supervisors provides me to run the jail. We don't just warehouse people in our facility. One thing I'm really proud of, and we started it about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago, is a mental health diversion. What we have found out in Yavapai County is that almost 50% of the people in our jail have some degree of mental health condition. Many times on minor crimes, the police are called in our community to respond to a trespass, a disorderly conduct. We get there as police and we have no alternative but to arrest this person who's actually off their medication and has a mental health issue. So if they get arrested, they become a criminal because of a medical condition. And I don't think that's right. So for the last 3.5, 4 years, we've worked very hard to divert these people out of our jail. And I'll give you one quick example because I don't want to take too long here. But on a pilot project in the Verde Valley with Spectrum Healthcare, we have all the officers trained to identify mental health conditions on minor type crimes. Law enforcement in the Verde Valley, and we've now started it here in the Prescott, in this side of the county, but 660 calls, and I'm trying to remember, I'm pretty sure it's 660, Dave? He's giving me the thumbs up. Out of 660 calls the law enforcement made to Spectrum Healthcare, they send a mobile response team. We stabilized that person. Spectrum Healthcare took over that scene, and out of 660 calls for service by deputies and other law enforcement, only 7 of those went to jail. That's huge. And that saves us as taxpayers from not having to pay those jail costs, but that's secondary. The most important part is they're getting medical treatment that they need. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. We also have a post-arrest diversion in our jail to look at individual inmates with mental health conditions. Can we get them out? Can we get them into treatment facilities? We're now working with a mental health judge. We work with Sheila Polk at the county attorney's office. We're working with everyone in the criminal justice system, and it's really starting to take hold and work. If you watch the current legislation right now, we have a bill in the legislation to try to get more funds out of the legislators to help us do this program and continue it more. So we provide a lot of services in our jail. It's not just housing inmates. We do a lot of things there, and we had an outside audit come in a few years ago. They took a look at the whole criminal justice system, and I think the jail, the efficiency of the way it's managed, I got to give my staff all the credit, but we came out looking very good in that audit. So if you have any questions for me, I'll be available, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Scott. You can do that up here. You know, fortunately, I've never had the chance to experience the inside of your facility. Your facility.
Mine.
Supervisors, would you like to say a word?
I wish, with all due respect, you would stop introducing me after they talk about the mentally ill. Well, I'm happy to see so many friendly folks. I know so many of you here, and of course, in my 3 terms as mayor, we held a number of events down here, and it's always a pleasure to come back. I feel like I'm coming home to these smiling faces. Then I've got these TV stars sitting up here that I watch on TV, so. On the serious side, this is hands down the most important issue we have before us this year, and it could be the most important issue we've had in I don't know how many years. If this does not pass, we're going to really have our work cut out for us in a big way. It's going to affect the cities, it's going to affect the towns, it'll affect everything across the board with the county, because you don't just replace over $8 million with a snap of a finger. So we are appealing, and the only thing you need to remember about this particular issue is all we're asking you to do is extend the existing tax, which is 1 penny per $4 spent. That's it. And the beauty of doing it with a sales tax is you don't carry all the burden as a property owner if you own property. People from out of town also contribute to this situation. So please be very thoughtful. I'm going to pass it on to some of the numbers people here. We'll let Craig Brown, he got all the press over the radio.
He actually
about
wanted
me.
to say younger, but he decided to pass on that.
So, yeah, I'm the oldest member of the board, so. But anyhow, the bottom line is, as stated, we've got, Phil is gonna be filling you in with more of the, some of the technicalities. We are all available. I do return phone calls, we all do. So if you have additional questions or issues or whatever, I encourage you to give us a call down at the county. So with that note, let me pass it on to Craig Brown to say a few words. He got all the radio publicity. And nobody even knew I'm chairman of the board. So, what can I say? But anyhow, we'll pass off to Craig Brown, and then we're gonna have Phil Verdon. We've actually got the Reader's Digest version of this for you. When Phil Verdon, when you get him to do that, folks, that's quite a compliment, because he has a tendency of going on and on and on. But that's what happens when you have an engineer doing this stuff. So without any further ado, Craig?
Thanks, Rolly. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, and I'm Craig Brown, the District Court Supervisor. I just want to mention that Rolly is this year's chairman, and we really appreciate his leadership. One of the things that when I do is I try to make things down and dirty so everybody can understand them in real plain numbers. The jail is actually $18.1 million per year to run. Approximately half, $9 million of that, comes from this quarter cent. The other $9 million comes from grants that we do get that amount to maybe 1%, and the vast majority of that, other 49%, comes from your property taxes and what you pay into the general fund. Now, we have to do that because of the law. Statutes say that we have to match the money that's basically taken in the quarter cent tax. So that quarter cent tax, if it goes away, we have to somehow find another way of coming up with $9 million. Now, this board, over the last 4.5 years that I've been on it, has worked very hard to keep our property tax rates as low as possible year after year, even absorbing cost of living and things like that. The economic downturn was a bad time for almost everybody. I mean, even if you were just on a static income, cost of living still went up, but did your pay go up? Probably not, especially if you're on Social Security or fixed income. So we had to manage our budgets, and we were able to do it for the last 3 or 4 years, and promise you that basically your taxes would not go up. And as if you look at your tax bill, which I urge everybody to take a look at, look and see where your money is actually going. This county is basically 17 to 18% of your tax bill. All the rest of that money is going somewhere else. Fire districts, school districts, sewer districts, water districts. So you have to look at that bill to know really where all your money is going to. So we've done the best we can with what we've had to work with so far. And yes, this year our budget would show, if you looked at it, about $20 million more, but that's because we were refinancing an existing bond from before. And you won't see it this year, and hopefully our total won't go up that much. I urge you to take this brochure with you. It has the basic facts. Share it with your neighbors and tell them, look, this is not a new tax. This is an existing tax. Without this tax money, we will not be able to continue with the amount of services we have. It'll also have a negative impact if you live in the small towns. If you live in Prescott, the cost of incarceration will be passed on to them, possibly. And say Machino Valley, Prescott Valley, and I heard the police chief in Prescott Valley the other night said that this would have a negative impact on their budget by almost $750,000. That can't be made up by small towns. Same thing would be Cottonwood, Camp Verde, and small towns like that, and also Sedona. So you have to take that into consideration. This is good for everybody, and part of it, like Rolly had said, is paid by those out-of-towners that are coming in to visit us. Now, some people say, well, you know, this has a negative impact on food. Well, food is not taxed. You go to the market, your food is not taxed. Other items you may buy at the market are taxed, but not food items. So, where was I going with this?
By the county.
By the county?
Food's not taxed by the county.
By the county. Anybody in here know what the tax is in Yavapai County? How much is the tax, Yavapai County tax? Sales tax? 3/4 of a penny is all. The other 5% you see on the tax bill, if you buy something in the county, goes to the state. That's where the 5% goes. So this 1/4 cent is that part of that 3/4 of a cent that you pay in sales tax. And it goes to a very good. And I have to say, I praise the sheriff all the time. And Dave Rhodes, his deputy, who's sitting here in the back trying to not be nonchalant, and his jail commander, they do a heck of a job running a jail. I spent 35 years looking at jails and being in the jail system, not literally, but I spent a lot on my entire professional career working in jails and seeing how they operate, and this is one of the most efficient jail systems you will ever find in the entire country. Go to Los Angeles and it's a nightmare, but they deal with a lot more people too. So, anyway, Chris?
Well, thank you. Take that back with you again. Well, thanks, guys. And one thing that always gives the membership of CTC heartburn is when a tax is said to sunset, and then it never does. It seems like once it's established, it's always here, it's always ongoing. And you mentioned earlier that this was supposed to sunset, and I have to tell you, I looked through all these arguments going back. The county never said it was going to sunset. They said that it would be for a 20-year term, and every time in the paperwork, it said that it could be voted on again by the taxpayers to continue it. So the only time I ever saw somebody bring up sunset was our elected officials in the pro arguments on the ballot in '99, and they said that the tax will sunset in 20 years if not reapproved by the voters. And then it was signed by everybody in the city of Cottonwood, mayor and council, city of Prescott, town of Camp Verde, town council of Clarkdale, and city of Sedona. So I think going for this is doing what you guys said 20 years ago that might actually happen. I'm gonna start out with one question that somebody from CTC that couldn't be here asked. And originally in the '99 pamphlet, it said that funds from this tax could be used in the construction of a jail. Does that continue today, or what is this tax going to be used for?
Thank you for the question, Chris. So the question was, can it be used for construction? By law, it can be used for financing, construction, maintenance, operation. Because by statute, this is a secondary district, and that's what the tax can be used for. In the beginning of the 20-year period already in place, there was a jail constructed. This this extension will be to maintain the existing facilities. It can't afford to do anything more than that. And so it's not for new construction. But if you look at the statute, it's kind of broad. It just says construction, finance, operation, maintenance. It's a statutory language. And that's why I want to make sure you understand. But This tax, what you're being asked to extend, is going to be used for the operation and maintenance of the existing jail system.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Go ahead, Tom, and I'll repeat what you say once you say it, so everyone in the back can hear.
Well, I just wanted to say there's two parts to taxes. One is like your property taxes. Your,
This sounds like it's going to be a narrative.
well, no. Your property taxes are affected by two things. The assessed net asset value of your home, which goes up every year, and the multiplier that the particular taxing source requires multiplied against the net asset value.
No, okay. I'll back up a little bit. Okay, your property taxes, regardless of what it's coming from, is based on the net asset value of your home, which increases in most years, and the factor, the multiplier, that is under the control of that particular political function. So in the case of the county, they can say, we're not raising your taxes because they're not raising the factor. But the fact that your home is now worth more, you're going to be paying more in dollars taxes. Now my question to the board is that sales tax, it's got a built-in COLA. The taxes, as all the products and services go up, the dollar tax goes up without changing anything. So can you provide us in the next period of time on how much this quarter-cent tax has actually increased in dollars to the county for this particular fund?
I didn't bring information on how it's gone up, and I'd be glad to. We have historical information. And what you'd see is actually during the economy drop, you saw it drop considerably. All revenue did. If you don't mind, can I respond to what you just said about taxes going out? What you're referring to is, yeah, NAV going up, net assessed valuation, and sometimes then the tax rate, depending on how you set it, is what brings in money to the county. Our county board, by statute, if they raise the levy above what would increase taxes, has to do what's called a truth in taxation hearing. And what the board's referring to is they haven't had to do that. So they didn't raise taxes on the overall population. You personally may see, depending on how your home fluctuates in value, and other taxing organizations. But this board has not held a truth and taxation hearing, I think, for 3-4 years in the general fund. But I understand what you're saying, sir.
And Phil, if the prices of the goods went up that got you more money, wouldn't the price of green bologna go up? That would you have to buy?
Yeah, exactly, if cost goes up outside, our costs also go up. Costs in the jail for what they're purchasing.
And that brings up a point. When this was originally passed out, or this tax was originally prepared for the public, the cost was said to be $8.94 million. Today, Sheriff, you're saying it's $18.1 million. What's driving these costs to go to more than double?
Now, ask me that again.
Okay, when this was first asked, it said that it cost $8.94 million to run the jail.
Okay.
And today, the new
20 years ago.
Oh, okay.
The new packet says 18.1.
Right. Well, I think the cost, we go through I think they call it the consumer pricing index or whatever it is so far as goods. The biggest cost that I have in the jail is staff. The staffing of the jail is 82 or 3 or 4%, I forget what it is. But imagine the food you're buying when you're cooking 50,000 meals a month, the cost of that goes up. The cost of the clothing, I have to clothe people, I have to provide them underwear, I have to provide them clothes, I have to provide them shoes. We are the care, custody, and confinement of everybody in our facility, and those costs go up. I have no control of that. The other thing I want you to remember, and I think all of you probably remember this, is back in 99, 2000, our population was not 230,000 as it is now. And the jail population back then, we had maybe 150 people in custody. Today, we run between 500 and 600. And so the population of the jail has gone up. And there's something I also want to say is if that population is 200 or 300, it still costs the same to run the jail because I have to have those employees in there, each doing a specific assignment. I don't base the employees on how many inmates are in a dorm. It's post assignments that they're responsible for covering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we just see those costs accumulate over 20 years.
Thank you. Larry?
Can I respond?
Go ahead,
also,
Greg.
too? One of the other things that I think we forget, this quarter cent's been around for 20 years, almost 20 years. Remember, every year, what's the cost of living go up? So that quarter cent that you're receiving, if it stays stagnant and does not fluctuate by some means, up or down, it's going to have a negative effect on what you're bringing into your jail. The fact the jail itself, the existing jail, is 20 years old, we're having big budget issues in regards to taking care of that. The HVAC system, just the heating and air conditioning units, is a big budget item that comes up every year, and we put it out over a period of 3 years to totally replace it. It is not cheap, and the costs continue to mount. It's like the cost of asphalt. Asphalt is astronomical right now. When oil fluctuates, it goes, asphalt prices go up and down. Same thing when you're running a jail. Another thing that hasn't been mentioned, which I'm sure you're all aware of because it's been very popular to talk about the last year, is the cost of a retirement program. Those corrections officers that are involved with the jail have a retirement program. It's not the same as PSPRS, and it's not as in bad a shape, but it's still something that has to be matched. The more corrections officers I need, the more benefits that I have to pay, and vice versa, and those things continue to go up. So things fluctuate with our population. Tax amount coming in is higher. But with that, we get more responsibility, more things we have to pay for with those dollars.
Now, Craig, and you mentioned the retirement for the correctional officers. Are they tied into PSPRS like the elected officials are, or are they a completely separate?
Separate program, separate program.
Thanks, Larry.
I have one question, but I also want to bring up a point of clarification. My question will go to Sheriff Scott Masher. Traditionally, having been in the law enforcement environment for 34 years, the Arizona Criminal Justice Enhancement Fund usually would take monies from fines and so forth. That money would be collected, and a good portion of that money would be distributed among the 15 counties to operate the jail systems, or at least to supplement the operation of those jail systems. So I guess my question to you, by looking at this brochure here, it looks like outside monies or miscellaneous monies only account to about 5%. So that's going to be a relatively small part. But before you answer that, I want to do my point of clarification so that folks understand jail systems here. Because I, as working for a major municipal police department, was a user of the jail system.
My questions.
By ordinance, the jail system does have to incarcerate all felony prisoners. But if you're going to incarcerate somebody on misdemeanors, and if those incarcerations are going to be as a result of mandatory sentencing schemes, a lot of departments would use mandatory sentencing schemes as a deterrent for things like prostitution, things along those lines. Whenever that happens, the department that is the user pays for that. Those daily fees, incarceration fees, and everything else. And the department I work for alone was paying anywhere between $10 to $15 million a year just in incarceration fees. And in the event this jail tax doesn't go, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit about what's going to be the consequences in terms of cities going to the jail system and subsequently trying to incarcerate prisoners.
You guys stop lying and saying you have a question, okay? So I think I'm going to try and repeat it. The question was, there is miscellaneous outside money that's coming in. What is that outside money? And what other things are you doing to divert criminals away from going into the jail from different departments that have to account for it themselves?
Or what happens if they don't get the money?
Did you get that?
I did,
Okay.
and I got a couple questions there. The first question is the jail enhancement monies, which come from state fines through the court system. We get a portion of that in Yavapai County, $200 and some thousand a year. 25% of that money we get goes to the training of my officers. I don't ask the Board of Supervisors for any money when it comes to training detention officers. I take that criminal justice enhancement money and utilize it to train officers. The rest of that money I use at what we need during the year that may come up that's not in my budget. One of the recent things was the mixer in the kitchen. We had, and I didn't realize this mixer was like this big with big, because that's how much food you cook in those mixers, but it was like $70,000 to get this thing in, to get it installed. Well, I didn't go to the board and ask them for that money. And so we used that enhancement monies for that. Have you folks seen those big buses driving down the highway that says, yep, right there, we use jail enhancement monies to offset the cost of those buses. So we put that money to use. The other question I got out of that is if this district dissolves, if it goes away, what normally happens if there isn't a jail district is the burden of the inmates being arrested and brought to the jail will fall upon the cities, the incorporated cities who arrest them. I think you heard Prescott Valley's cost would be just under $1 million. That's because they would have to pay the cost of those initial inmate bookings and what those costs are. Chino Valley, Prescott, Jerome, Cottonwood, Sedona, Camp Verde, DPS, they would all have to come up with monies to offset those costs. That's what was being said there. That's why Phoenix paid millions of dollars, because I don't think they have a jail district in Phoenix. So the local cities and municipalities pay for those costs. So that's what the other question was. And did I get them? Is that all of them, Larry? Okay. Thank you very much.
And you know, Scott, those buses that you got that transport the prisoners, in the movies, they never work. The guys always get away from them. It blows up, it rolls over.
I'll
run
tell
away.
you, they do break down. Today I was working on my truck, so I know things break down, but it is, you know, it's mechanical, and we have to fix them and pay those costs. We transport over 1 million miles a year in our transport vehicles. It's a big county. We do a lot of moving around.
Greg, you wanted to respond on that too?
Yeah, just real quick, I was lucky enough to be out with the jail commander, Jeff Noonan, and Jeff was giving us some very good information statistically, but 95% of the inmates in our current county jail are felons. They're not misdemeanors. Those misdemeanors that are about 5%, their average stay is about 4 days. So they are not the major impact, it's the felons. Because we don't want to release those people back into the public, because obviously we want to be safe. We want to keep them away from the good people. So that's one of the big issues. The other one is that the sheriff touched on it in the very beginning, is you got to, whether you have 1 or 10 of these types of people in a pod, you still have to have that staff there to look after them. And staffing costs continue to rise along with everything else. So it's really hard, you know, without a cost of living built in, you're stuck with the same amount of money. If the economy goes down, if people stop spending money, you know, as such as, you know, in sales tax, well, that's less money that can be then used in this jail district, and it has to be absorbed from other places. And where is that? The general fund, mostly.
One question that came in from our membership, and this membership-wide causes heartburn as well. It's a special election that you guys are holding. It costs extra money to do this. How come you did not do this last November? Why did you not put it off to this current November? And instead of costing, how much did this election cost? And why couldn't you have moved it to another election where it would reduce the cost to the taxpayers?
The election costs about $200,000. And I know that sounds like a lot, but actually elections cost very much more than that. This is an all-mail election. We don't have to do vote centers. You don't have a lot of cost of people. Our cost actually is the mailing and the ballot preparation. And the reason I put forward to the board to say this is needed is because we started looking at our budget and we decided, and I recommended, that they put it on a special election so that it got the visibility by the public, did not get buried into all sorts of other issues. This is very important. And most importantly, If this question is very important for the board to deal with over a 2 or 3 year period. If this tax, this sales tax goes away, this existing $0.25, my primary job at the county, one of the biggest things I do is I work with the Board of Supervisors, elected officials, and departments on budgeting and how we're gonna close that budget. And so they're gonna need at least 2 years, 2 budget cycles, a little more than that even, but at least 2, to decide how they would fill that gap. And that's the reason why.
Well, and I don't know if you completely answered that question. Why did you not put it last November? Why didn't you put it this November? Why does it have to be a special election? Because then your postage would be covered, your printing would be covered.
Actually, it would be at a November election, it would be in many other issues, and again, we were going through last year's budget, which was at a point where we started discussing it and putting it on the ballot for, it exceeded the timeline when we were through last year's budget. You have 180 days to put it on. So when this board was dealing with last year's budget, it was too late to put it on November's budget, November's election.
All right, thank you. And I mean, just to clarify CTC's mindset, you know, like we were looking at this funding the jail district where it says a $4 coffee will only cost you an additional penny in tax. We're asking ourselves, who the heck would pay $4 for a cup of coffee? So that's a different mindset. I think we had a question coming from the audience right here. Right? You had your hand up, didn't you? No, you're just sneezing? Okay. Okay, go ahead, sir.
I'm a retired law enforcement from California, and the cities have been moving away from opening their own jails due to the cost. It's cheaper to send them to the sheriff who is experienced and can keep the cost down. So if Prescott and everybody else had to start opening up jails here, you'd see your property tax go way up. So it's better to vote for that $0.25 and let the sheriff handle it all, because he's experienced in it and keep the cost down. I'll put the burden on his back.
I don't know if that was a question, but great statement. Go ahead, Jerry.
I wanted to ask a couple of questions, and that was, we taped every single thing when Mary Beth Wren was running for Board of Supervisors. And at that time, you were talking new jail, new jail, new jail.
Here, they can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's karaoke day at Las Fluenzas.
Those of us that were working with, is this on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. With Mary Beth Wren, when she was running for Board of Supervisors, we taped everything, and at that time, people were pushing new jail, new jail, new jail. We heard it at least 100 times over that period. Now you're talking about just maintaining this jail. I wanted to ask one thing, and that's the reason why you have a former Board of Supervisor that didn't get elected to the legislature, because everything was put clear over in the Verde Valley, and lawyers didn't like it, and judges didn't like it. I want to know, is every single person that's in your jail over there, are they from this district, this county, or are they any other counties?
Right now, our jail is filled up with just people out of this county.
But you take it out of state and out of town.
Well,
Maricopa County. and
what
stuff.
I did was in 2008, when the economy tanked on us, even the crime went down. Our population in the jail went down. If you were to correlate crime and the economy, you would think the worse the economy, the more crime you would get. But that's not what happened in Yavapai County. When our economy tanked, our crime followed that decline, and it opened up a whole bunch of bed spaces. I was paying all this staff who had minimal inmates. I don't want to go into private business, but I said I could make money if I brought inmates in. And so I rented those beds to the United States Marshals. And we generated millions of dollars to offset our taxes during that time. Millions. I don't remember the total amount, Phil, but
Like over $5 million.
over $5 million we generated in our jail because we had those open beds. Now, as the jail population of Yavapai County arrests started to build back up, we didn't have any more beds to rent. but we made $5 million to offset your taxes. So now we don't have those people in our facility anymore. We're just full. As a matter of fact, today I probably got 50 people on the floor. This tax is not about right now building a new jail. This is about maintaining what we have at $8 million a year to pay for half the cost of what we have. That's what it does. And now lastly, you said something I want to address because I was here when this happened. In 1999, when we in Yavapai County needed to build a new jail, you asked why it went in the Verde Valley.
I've lived here since 1941,
Okay,
so
I appreciate
longer
it.
than you.
Yes, that's older than me, I'm not quite that, and I appreciate it. But the point I want to make is this, and this is important for you to understand, because I felt bad about it at the time. We needed a new jail. We were under federal mandates. The federal government came in and said, we're going to take over your jail. You are so overcrowded, you have got to build one. And they tried like heck to build one here in Prescott area. And everywhere they picked, out on Commerce, out by Pioneer Lakes, everybody showed up with signs and threw an absolute fit, do not build it here, do not build it here, do not build it here. And the folks in the Verde Valley said, we want it. And we want it right here. We deserve just as much service as everybody else. We're a taxpayer. We want the people over here to have jobs. We want it. And so they had nowhere else to go at the time. And Chip Davis, I think, was the board of supervisor, if I remember right.
Yes, he was.
And he said, right here. And that's what happened. Not only that, they put the courts right there. They put the county attorney right there. It's like a one-stop shop. We don't transport anywhere over there. We walk the inmates to the court, or the judges come to us. So now I look 20 years later and said, damn, I wish we would have done that here.
Yeah.
But see, that's what happened. Nobody wanted it then. And I was here, I went through it all. That's what happened.
You know, I'd like to see the jail in Prescott as long as it's not in my backyard.
You don't have a backyard.
Back then, in '99, and I don't know, this might take Phil or the sheriff, you might remember this too. When they were pushing this tax, one of the things they promised was to lower property tax if the sales tax was passed. Did that happen? And is there any hope of that happening this time around? You're not allowed to answer.
When this tax was put out, the board did promise in the pamphlet, I believe it was a 10-cent reduction, and that did occur when it passed. You can check that year after it passed, it dropped 10 cents. Now that was because it was a new tax, and they knew that they would be able to drop the property tax, the levy, because we would be getting sales tax to basically address the loss of that. This is just to extend it. And I think, I'm not gonna answer for the board on that, but I think every year they look at the county budget and they try to keep the property taxes low in this county. I always try to let people know, the state limits a lot of what counties can do. And they have a limit of what our county can levy on taxpayers. This board has it at 80% of that levy limit right now.
Questions from the audience? Go ahead, Kurt.
I totally appreciate you going forward and doing a continuation of the tax, pretty much as is. I know that the county, and correct me if I'm wrong, bought a parcel of property at the roundabout where it's on Prescott Lake Parkway and Dog Ranch. That was supposed to be the location for the new jail. So, let's just be positive here, and if this tax passes, what is the chance that the board has on its plate to really still continue wanting to build a new jail? And will that be a separate bond issue in the future? Thank you.
You know, that's still up for discussion. It really is. You know, we went to the people and asked about that here a couple years ago. And overwhelmingly, you know, well, I wouldn't say overwhelmingly, but by a thin margin, we're actually, people said, no, we don't want an additional jail tax. to build a new jail on this side of the hill. So that tells us two things, okay? Once they didn't want that additional, expense, and so it wasn't passed on. Now remember, this is when the economy was down. Jail capacity was almost at max, not much, it's not any better. We've tried to initiate all the programs that people suggested. The sheriff's got, I think we have 6 different programs now trying to keep the misdemeanors out. But now we're full of felons. So it's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with felons. You're not, there's a different amount of security that you have to have, and the programs are not as extensive, and you can't give them as much help because they're felons. They're basically sitting in jail waiting to go to prison. So, but the other part of your question was, is there are really 2 separate issues. One is this $0.25 we're talking about today is the maintenance of the existing jail and everything that takes place, and it's half of the money that's required. If we were to build another jail, we would have to first, we have the property, and that was built. That property was bought by a previous board of supervisors. I think Tom Thurman is the only one who was here when that property was purchased. At the time they thought they were getting a deal, there was a lot of politics involved with it. I wasn't involved at all before my time. I think before, Rolly might have been mayor at the time. But it's one of those situations, yeah, we own the property. Yeah, we've done some improvements on it, but we took it out of, hide out of our facilities people doing the work. And we're waiting to see what's gonna happen in the next 2 years. If this does not pass, there are gonna be some shock waves felt through the community. And I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just telling you the bottom line truth. There's gonna be things that are gonna happen to the small cities that they're not gonna be able to deal with. County will have to look at every way we can possibly look at, and we are down to bare bone as it is right now. We don't go out and give large sums of money away to people unnecessarily. We cut everything we possibly can cut and try to gauge things out over long periods of time, so we don't have to come up with large chunks of cash all in 1 year. And we try to stretch it out over 3 years. We've gone after every grant dollar, I think, that is out there, and we've been very lucky that we've been honored to get some grants. In fact, there's another one coming up here very shortly for the Sheriff's Department coming from the state. It's $500,000, and we're going after every penny, and Health Department just got offered one here recently, and we're gonna maybe be able to help us afford some construction out in Prescott Valley. So we're trying to keep every dollar we can, and everybody will say, well, those are tax dollars. Yeah, but if they went to the federal government, I want them back, and I'll take all of California's if they want to give it to us, so. Anyway, Roland?
Two points I want to add that have come up, and Kurt, I appreciate your question. We have no magic wand or ball as to predicting. There's no doubt the day will come someday where that will have to be addressed. Whenever that time is, it will involve the public. So it's not one of those things, but it has nothing to do with this. Now, another point is in 1999, when they went for the $0.25, this existing $0.25 tax, they had the ability of doing it for a ½ cent. And to be fiscally responsible, they chose to only do a $0.25 cent. So that in itself should go down as a major asset when you were addressing something about lowering of taxes. Another point I want to point out is the sheriff is telling you about the government and when we did have beds and the money that was made and everything else. Pinal County saw that going on, and the sheriff at the time went forward and they expanded their jail, a very expensive expansion, and they got greedy with the idea that they were going to pack that place and make tons of money. Well, right about the time they finished that great big new jail down there, the federal government decided to change their plans as to where they were housing these prisoners. So even if we hadn't filled up when we did and whatever, that would have gone away. Now Pinal County is hurting. They are strapped beyond belief. So the reason for me telling that story is this shows good planning on the side of Yavapai County. We have been rated as the #1 county in the state of all the counties as far as money management and being fiscally responsible. And we're proud of that. And we have been watching that very closely. So anyhow, I just wanted to add those two little points, that it's really, efforts have been made. They could have done a half set 20 years ago. And frankly, part of me wishes they would have, because we could have had a buildup of funds. There's a lot of things that could have happened. But that's history, and the decision was made to keep it down. And that's what they did, and our intent is to maintain and hold the course, so.
And Sheriff, one thing I wanted to get in is our membership really wanted to pass this on. You know, we debate policy, we debate taxation, but we think that your deputies are a very well-trained professional force. And I don't know how many people know this, but Yavapai County is as big as the state of New Jersey. And if you ever look in your little sheriff's trucks running around, usually there's one guy that could be out there all by themselves, and they got to John Wayne it against a bad guy. So, I mean, really, they're pretty good. Don't you guys agree?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, now let's hit them some more. And by the way, back then, they based this tax and their considerations on the average house in Prescott, and they did that on a $120,000 house.
Yeah.
Glenn?
Thank you. I guess I'm not for the tax, against the tax, but I have only one question about the verbiage of the tax. We talk about it being a special tax, it's gonna sunrise or sunset. Why do we, and it's like $18 million in the budget. So if it's in the budget, is it really a special tax, number one? Number two, if it's $18 million in the budget, will it ever sunset, as we're talking about it today? Because in 20 years from now, I'd like to put $20 down at the casino for Supervisor Brown and I's grandkids, that there will be another supervisor sitting here saying, we need this tax, it's gotta continue. Why not just say, forget, we're gonna spend the money on a special election. Let's just vote the tax in or out, whatever it's gonna be. It's never gonna go away.
The question is, why say that this tax will sunset in 20 years? Why not just make it a permanent thing if we're gonna vote on it?
Actually, that's a common question. What you're asking is, why did the board, either in the past or now, put it in place permanently and ask the voters to do it permanently? I think the general basis is, and I know back in 1999, this was the discussion by the board, is to allow the public to vote it in, and then have a point in time where that public gets to kind of gauge how it's been used. And I think if we were here today asking for it to be permanent, and I appreciate that you might say that's okay, but I think we also might be challenged by people of, oh, it's a tax and we never get to visit, should it continue?
Can't get rid of it.
Yeah, you never know.
Way now, though.
What we're saying is,
Maybe
if
this
it's
time.
yeah, if it doesn't go away, what you mentioned, the $18 million budget, that's the budget. That's how much the cost of the jail is. The revenue is half of that is the sales tax. So basically, the board, if I'm sitting with the board during budget over the next 2 years, and I'm having to tell them that in 2 years, $8.8 million is no longer there, I'm gonna have to provide them options to fill that gap with other areas. So that's the answer to that, sir.
And you know, I had a little flashback when reading the 1999 pamphlet. Tell me if any of you guys get this either. Approximately 1/3 of the jail district sales tax would be paid for by visitors, reducing the burden on county residents. I mean, that's been used again and again. Is that still the same today? We saw the city of Prescott do that, but they were counting on the county residents outside be paying for their tax that they recently approved. Do we really have 30% of our people giving taxes?
Actually, we did a study on that. We had ASU Business School do a study about, I think it was a year ago, and they looked at the past numbers, and they did change. It's down to about 17 to 18% because we're the county. When you're looking at the county, you have areas that you're taking into account in population and area, like Seligman, Congress, and so we did reevaluate that. So what you're seeing is just about 1/5 of the sales tax for the county is outside residents.
All right. Another question from the gang? Joe?
Let me,
Oh.
Chris, let me
Hang on a second.
elaborate on that a little bit. When ASU did this report, they based it on numbers that were almost 2 years old. And so you're looking back at the lowest point of the economy and what was going on, and they judged it off of what was taking place in Phoenix and in other towns relatively in size and population. The question is during that low period of time, economic period of time that they were using in their numbers, it's a variable, because now when you look at things as they are at a pro-economic time, when things are really moving along quite well, when we have an awful lot of events and things that are taking place within the county, there is some wiggle room in that number. Because originally when we were talking about building the new jail and we're talking to you about that, remember we were using numbers that were 35% as I recall. And that was based on a previous report that was based also on numbers coming out of the Phoenix area. So.
Joe?
I've heard some numbers bandied about that if this doesn't pass, the town of Prescott Valley would be liable for, somebody mentioned 600,000.
It was 750, and that was from the police chief, Joe.
What's that?
The police chief used the number $750,000.
Whatever it is, Prescott would have a similar burden.
Yes, it-
Then everything from Jerome to Sedona and so forth, all the municipalities. It sounds like we're doing and taking the burden of a job that's theirs. Why aren't they contributing now in order to save
That would
those
also be
funds?
from this.
The question is, why aren't the cities and municipalities paying their fair share into the system? Why did you just assume it all?
Very good question, because it's state law. So let me go over that real quick. Joe, right? Joe Pendergast. When the Board of Supervisors established this district, the statute basically says that when it's voted in, because people in the cities and towns are paying into that sales tax, we no longer can charge them for the daily booking and fees that would normally be charged to them. When we looked at this $8.8 million revenue that we have coming in right now, we worked with the jail staff and the commander out there and the sheriff's office, and we estimate that it's just about 2.2 to 2.3 million that would account for the bookings if we lose the sales tax. So we will have to make up the rest. So the point is, why did we take that on? Because by law we had to take we could no longer charge those cities and towns. What we're trying to convey to the public as well as the cities and towns is if this goes away and the jail district goes away, it means we are at a point where we're pretty much obligated to then bill them for the inmates that they have. We would be going back 20 years in how the operation and funding was.
And only the misdemeanor inmates, not the felons.
Did that answer the question, Joe?
One of our members asked, or said that they realized there was a huge amount of uncollected property taxes hanging out there. And shouldn't these outstanding taxes be collected or property seized to sold to pay for these taxes before asking for additional revenue from taxpayers?
I don't think there's a tremendous amount of uncollected property taxes. The treasurer works diligently, and you'll know there's lien sales that go on when people don't pay their taxes. So there's a mechanism that we receive our taxes. So that's how I'd respond to that.
Sir, thanks for being patient.
No, fine. Do the inmates pay a certain percentage of their keep?
The question was, do inmates pay for their stay at the jail? They have money, yes. If we arrest someone and they have money on them, it goes into a bank account. And up to a certain amount by law, we can charge them, and we do. And we generate quite a bit of money throughout the year for medical, for food. You're gonna get charged for food, whatever you have money for, and so we do that. Yes, thank you.
So you can up your quality of menu if you've got the money?
You know, what I have to do, and you know, I told you, the jail's complex. I have to supply a specific amount of calories per inmate every day by law. That could be green bologna, that could be, but we have to provide those calories. And they have to have a hot meal, at least one hot meal. The breakfast can be cold, the lunch can be sandwiches, but I have to follow federal law and standards. So we try to keep a menu in course with that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
This would be to Mr. Masham. You know, policing, one of the aspects of it is that there's drug interdiction. And a lot of times there is a lot of different marijuana and so on confiscated as well as cash. And so I was wondering if the jail system can benefit, because now we have medical marijuana, so I don't know if that can be sold and used, the revenue goes back to the jail system, but also the cash that's confiscated in criminal activity.
Yeah, what you're talking about there is donations from drug dealers. And what we do in Yavapai County, you've probably seen it in the newspaper a lot. We have canines out working the highways. We have interdiction animals out there who will, as an example, stop a car, the dogs detect drugs of some sort, we search the car, we find a suitcase with $100,000 in it, and the person driving the car says, I rented this car, I've never seen that suitcase before. So that money goes through a legal forfeiture through the court system. If it passes all the judicial seizures, that goes into a RICO account, a forfeited account that is, has oversight by our county attorney. Then that money is divided up with all the police agencies in Yavapai County, and I want to say there's 12 or 13, 14, I don't remember counting everybody. We then get our portion and put it, again, offsetting our tax money. We've been using it to pay for the helicopter, the search and rescue helicopter, and other RICO things, but so yes, we do use that money to offset the costs as things come up. But then the laws are changing right now and going through certain things. It's very, very specific what we can and can't use it for. And it's getting harder to seize the money.
You can't use it to supplement your budget, you can only use it for training issues.
The question is, you cannot use it to supplement your budget, you can only use it for training issues,
Right,
right?
and what I use it for is, if you guys remember, 5 years ago, we got a helicopter donated to us. And everybody said, oh my gosh, that's gonna be so much money. And it is, but the drug dealers donate those monies. And that's how we run that helicopter. That, and I get money from the Forest Service if we're doing search and rescue. I'm not using it for law enforcement, that was the other issue. We use it for search and rescue, that's it, and maybe in an emergency thing here or there, but that's all we use it for.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Chris, we've been here an hour,
You've been here an hour.
and Las Fuentes probably wants the room back. This has been interesting, but it's such a slam dunk. Why is there anybody against this?
That's what we were here to find out. People were asking, does CTC have a position? All the way up to, does CTC have a position? Well, no. We're gonna have a forum, we're gonna ask our questions, then we're gonna go to the membership, and we're gonna decide how we go one way or the other. I think, my personal feelings
Yeah.
is, this tax sounds like it needs to continue. My heartache, why are we spending $200,000 on a special election?
Yeah.
Why isn't it in November here, November there?
Let me answer that question.
That wasn't me.
My question is,
That wasn't the sheriff.
my decision was made a little differently on this than maybe the rest, and I'm not speaking for the board, I'm only speaking for me. My decision on why we should have it originally in March and or May, because we are going to a budget session as we speak. We started just this last Wednesday. We have to start planning, not only are we planning for next year, we're planning for 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Now, whether another board decides to change that or not is up to them. But it's very hard to lead and be successful leading when you have no idea what asset you have to use to do that. You don't plan on something, you don't plan your home before you know how much it's gonna cost you. And that's very basically, we need to know what we're working with here. 2020, I mean, is right around the corner. We're already doing 18-19 budget. So think about that. It's only a year off and we'll be talking about 2020. You have to plan, and you need to do it as far in advance as possible.
I didn't bring something up, but as a comparison, the changes from somewhere in the $60,000 to $80,000 if we put it on a general election, because that is, we have to spread the cost with everybody, but it's more expensive because it's a vote center election. We have more cost. This is approximately $200 to $220, I think is the cost. So that's the difference in cost.
That buys a lot of beer. If you would like to be a part of that decision on how we do that, CTC's next meeting is February 14th. It's Valentine's Day. I will do a reminder to you guys to get your wives a card so you don't get in trouble there. That makes it worth coming to the meeting all by itself.
It's also statehood day. Yes.
Yeah, okay, like that matters. Oh, honey, I didn't get you a card for Statehood Day. She don't care about that. All right, well, this has been good stuff, you guys. CTC would like to thank our panel for being part of today's discussion and invite those of you in the audience to join us on February 14th at the Residence Inn in Prescott at 1 p.m. for our next meeting. I want to thank all of you guys for coming here today. Our goal is not just to vote, but to be an informed voter. No matter which way you decide, we hope you will leave here more knowledgeable than when you walked in. And remember, if you break the law, your vote may determine the quality of your future meals. So have a good meeting, y'all. Thank you for coming out, and thank you to our board. Thank you, Los Angeles.